Welcome to What's a Beautiful Life Anyway? I'm your host, Jill Bennett. This is the channel that shares ideas to help you live your best life, because life can be beautiful if you live consciously. So welcome to this episode of What's a Beautiful Life Anyway? I'm your host, Jill Bennett, and I'm thrilled and delighted today that recently I made contact with someone I hadn't seen for a long time, and she will make just the best guest. It is Florence Parot. Good afternoon, Florence.
Good afternoon, Jill.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you here. And it was so lovely. I had such a nice surprise in a networking meeting the other day when Florence was there. And it was just lovely to see you. It's been quite a few years, hasn't it?
Few years indeed. It was lovely to see you again. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we've got something in a real treat for you today, because Florence helps overwhelmed people find serenity in everyday life. And I think we all need a little bit of that if we want to live our best life. And Florence uses something called sophrology. So I think possibly most people out there haven't heard of sophrology, because I certainly hadn't before I met Florence. So Florence, how did you get into sophrology? And then we'll talk about what sophrology is. So start with telling us how you got involved.
Well, when I first heard about it, I was the same. I had no idea what this was about. I was in burnout. I was 23 years old. And my doctor in France recommended it. And I had no idea. I said, so for what? But basically, I was prepared to try anything. So for me, it was the beginning of a long journey, which I didn't know at the time would lead me to one day become a sophrologist. But that's how I discovered it, because I needed it badly at that time of burnout.
Yeah. And it's amazing. In all the interviews I've done for Brooklands Radio, the number of people I've interviewed who got into whatever they're doing because it helped them with a problem. And that makes us so authentic when we do something, doesn't it? If you are literally helping people with something that's really, really helped you. So I think it's a brilliant way to start. And also, I have to say, I'm so impressed with the French medical professionals that they recommend something different. And we can touch base on that again in a minute, because I know they're very different in many European countries compared to how they treat things in the UK. But I think we really need to start with, what is sophrology?
Yeah, I think that would help, wouldn't it? Sophrology means the science of the consciousness in harmony. Sounds very nice, doesn't it? Already, I don't know about you, but already I feel more peaceful. It was created by a Spanish neuropsychiatrist in 1960, and basically he thought, there must be something out there to help my patients be better, other than, drugs and, electroshocks, you name it. I mean, nothing, can you imagine Spain in the 1960s, probably not the best psychiatric treatments you would have wanted. And his wife was a yoga enthusiast. And so she got him into, looking into India and meditation, and they traveled a lot together there in India, and they went to visit the Dalai Lama as well. And so he looked in all those Eastern techniques and he loved them, and he thought, well, there is something I could do with that. At the same time, in Europe, there was a lot of development around relaxation techniques and hypnotherapy. So he looked into that as well, and from all of that, in a way, he created his own technique, but inspired by what he had learned from yogis, from Zen masters, etc. And his idea was to have a method that is effective, of course, but very simple, because especially at the time, not everybody was prepared to, meditate for 2 hours or sit cross-legged on the floor for such a long time, for instance. And he thought this could really, the knowledge, the techniques there could really help everyone, but they need to be more approachable in a way. So that's what he did. He transformed it so to really take the essence of it, so that we can use that in our everyday lives.
fascinating, and just imagine medical professionals treating the whole person instead of, as many do, looking at the symptom and giving a pill or a drug or something. I mean, this is so much more effective, isn't it? And you were teaching sophrology in the UK for quite a time, which again is amazing. And the school that you set up continues, which again is pretty amazing. But I want just to touch on the fact that you also wrote the first book ever in English on sophrology. So maybe tell us about the book and more about the training centre, because there'll be many people listening who are in the UK, and it would be lovely to know about the centre there. Or there may be other therapists listening who could actually train to be a sophrologist, which again would be amazing. So yeah, maybe start with the book.
So the book is, the very first one is called Instant Serenity for Life and Work. And I wrote that, many years ago, more than 10 years ago. I can't remember the exact date now, because there was nothing basically about sophrology in the English-speaking world. The Spanish neuropsychiatrist who created it did not teach or write in English. So he didn't touch that part of the world. He was teaching in Spanish and French. And so the book is really about the basics of sophrology and how they can apply in your everyday life. It's a simple book. It's really a great introduction to the method. And later on, I went to write another book, a more substantial one, you could say, called the Sophrology Method, which develops a little bit more all the themes and really looks at how you can apply sophrology to be less stressed, to sleep better, to help with anxiety, all sorts of different themes basically that I look into and give specific tools and exercises. It's as always, you'll hear me say that a lot, but it's very practical, and that's what I like about it. Yeah. So both books are about that, about how do I apply it in my everyday life, basically.
And yeah, by keeping it simple and making it accessible for everyone, there's no one really who couldn't use it, is there?
That's the idea. The idea is that it's not a method where you have to spend that much time doing this, or you have to do this in week 1, week 2, week 3. It's not how it works. It's a lot of different tools, yeah. And you can adapt to whatever's happening to you. I mean, some colleagues use it for the elderly. Some people use it in hospitals with people who are sick in bed. So it's used with children, it's used with pregnant women, it's used for athletes. I mean, you can really adapt it to whoever you are working with as a sophrologist. And I think that's the beauty of it as well. It's very adaptable, very flexible. And if someone says, I can't do the exercises, but you have to stand up and do some small movements, that's okay. You can do them sitting down, for example. Yeah. That really is the beauty of it.
And in this school in the UK, is that aimed at a particular type of person, or do they do classes for almost anybody?
Well, the school, which is called the Sophrology Academy, and which is based in Kent, is to train professional practitioners.
Ah, okay.
Right, so it's a 2-year course, but there are also shorter courses depending on what it is you are actually looking for.
Yeah.
And it's a mixture of classes on site, so in Kent, and online, because some of the techniques have to be learned in person.
Yeah.
But obviously nowadays there's also a lot we can do through technology, which is the beauty of it. So it's a mixture of both, and it's a lovely team of teachers there. I still teach there from time to time. But it's yes, it's a great teamwork, and it could be anybody, because it could be coaches, other therapists, but also someone who wants to completely change their lives, as I did, because I worked in business management. So when I retrained to become a sophrologist, for me it was a complete change of career. So we have that a lot as well, but also people like midwives, teachers, sports coaches who feel that can complement their present jobs.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of it, isn't it? That anybody really who's a therapist of any kind could train to do this and it would just be an extra string to their bow, really. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so people could have a sophrology session with you, could they, online?
So they can have sophrology sessions with me online. I do very few one-to-one sessions now. So it's basically, we talk about it and we see whether we're the right fit as sophrologists and clients. Otherwise, there are a lot of other sophrologists in the UK and nearly anywhere in the world now, because it's becoming more and more common. I mean, we've trained people who live in America and Australia, in the Middle East, everywhere.
Wow.
But for my work, so I do some one-to-ones. I do a lot of small group work now online. And that's something I really like. And I'm going to give you an exclusive, Jill. I am actually going to open a membership before the end of the year. So that's going to be my main way of working on top of teaching and writing books. It's going to be a membership where people can actually have monthly group sessions and a lot of materials they can use by themselves to feel better and more serene in their lives, because that's the idea.
That is the idea, isn't it? So I guess you could, what would be ideal, I think, is employers in high pressure environments could run some online classes for their staff. Yeah, it's a shame the NHS don't offer it to start with to their staff and then to patients. That would be perfect. That would be absolutely perfect. So if someone's listening and they're thinking, oh, this sounds like it could really help me, what's the best thing that they can do?
Well, it could be starting with reading one of my books or other books on the subject. There are several now in English, which is a great thing. Of course, if it's about trying it out, I would say do get in touch, because of course I could redirect them to absolutely the right person, whether it's myself, whether it's a colleague, someone near them in the UK or elsewhere, or someone who's particularly the right person for what they're looking for. Yeah. But it's, trying it, whether it's a one-to-one session, whether it's a group session, whether it's live or online. I think you have to try it. The books are great to give you an idea, but trying it for yourself is always fantastic, because it's really something that needs to be lived. Yeah,
I tried it. Gosh, it must be about 10 years ago now in London. I went to a session there, and it's well worth trying. Let's just think a little bit more about burnout. So I've known people who've got burnt out, and I've probably come close to it when I was working in London and juggling childcare, with a toddler and a baby at home, and trying to hold down a big job. But how can people recognize if they're close to or feeling burnout? How would they feel? What would they notice?
So what's interesting is that they may not notice themselves. Usually it's easier for someone else around them, a relative, a friend, a colleague who's close to them, to realize what's happening. Because when you're in it, when you're so deep in hyperstress that it could become burnout, you can't really feel it, you can't really see it anymore. But the signs are usually you're very active, you're hyperactive nearly, in a way. So you never stop, you never take a break, you're always on, and your mind is so fired that usually in the morning you get up or you wake up much earlier than you would usually do. Even if, let's say you're a morning person, you wake up very easily at 6. Well, maybe you wake up at 5 or 4. And if it's usually 7, maybe at 5 you're all awake, and you start feeling your eyes go boom, and your brain starts, running through endless to-do lists. That's really a sign something is not quite where it should be. If it goes on for a few days, that's okay. But if it's something that is increasing, then it's not a really good sign. Usually, some people become like snappy at others, or start crying for no reason, as in they're not really like that usually. A lot of my clients say that they realize something is wrong when, for instance, suddenly they forget someone's name, someone new, maybe at work, or and suddenly names escape them, or they look at their computer and they go like, what was I doing again? One of my clients said she was in front of her washing machine and suddenly she couldn't remember how to put it on. It was like, you know, she'd had it for 10 years, super simple. She was, I don't know, a high, a highly functioning executive, and suddenly she couldn't put her washing machine on. And she went, okay, something must be wrong. So if a lot of this happens, then it's not a really good sign. Another sign which is interesting is if you're into sport, or if you have some sort of physical activities that you haven't stopped, because you either have stopped everything years before, or you are still doing it, but suddenly you decide you're going to do a lot more. For instance, you were going to the gym every Saturday and suddenly you decide you're going every day. Well, you wake at 5, so you think you might as well do something. And you're going to prepare for a marathon. That's the type of mindset that people find themselves in when they are very close to burnout. And the more signs there are, the more dangerous it is. Of course, not everyone goes into burnout, and it may take years more, but you never know. And that's the thing, you never know where your own limit is and when you're going to go bang into it. I was only 23. Some people do that when they're 50, but we see a lot of younger people going into burnout, even children.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's really something that we need to be attentive.
Do you think with children especially that there's pressure on them from parents to achieve more or to be the best at something?
Usually, and you know, it's the same for adults, it's not one thing, it's a conjunction. It's a too much of everything. A child, for instance, could be hypersensitive, so react very strongly to a lot of things, and have some pressure in the family, and maybe have some pressure at school, for instance.
Yeah.
If all of that is present, it's too much.
Yeah.
And it could be that at some point, one little thing is the last straw that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah.
And you know, it could end up in something other than burnout. It could be, you know, school phobia. It could be many different things.
Yeah.
I see a lot of teenagers with anxiety, very high anxiety, especially, you know, sort of heightened since COVID, with having to wear a mask at school, a lot of different things. But it's usually, whether it's a child, a teenager, or an adult, a conjunction of things. That's why I like to say as well, burnout is not just about work. And you said it very well earlier on. It was juggling the job and the children and the family and the house and everything.
Yeah.
And so usually it is when there's been too much of everything for too long.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That really does make sense. Now, I know you've got a great giveaway for people, haven't you, that anyone listening can get this. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, if you are maybe worried that you might be near burnout, or you're wondering how you're doing, on my website, you will find a great quiz that you can take. It's free. Where you can assess where you're at, whether there's any danger there or not. And also free at the moment, burnout guide, the anti-burnout guide, I think that's what I've called it, where basically you learn more about burnout, what burnout is, how it shows up, and what to do to avoid it or to recover from it if you're already there.
Okay, so, and this could be you thinking maybe you are, but it could also be someone close to you in your life that you think could be, it could really help with that. Okay, well, we're going to post links to all of that in the show notes. So that will be very, very easy for people to find, and we'll put your website so people can contact you via there if they want to talk to you or book an appointment to see you, which is great. I think to finish with, Florence, maybe you could talk a little bit about how to get a relaxed mind, because as you say, a relaxed mind is a clear mind. So are there just one or two tips that you could leave people with to, just to find more serenity in their lives?
So, of course, I would like to point out, it's not a magic wand. So it's not something you usually learn in 2 seconds. It's a training, just like you would train for a marathon, by the way. It's also a training to become more and more used But a couple of things. When things start to feel crazy, I would say stop for a few seconds as soon as you can, and close your eyes, breathe as deeply as you can, and start with breathing out. It's actually easier to do some deep breathing if you start with breathing out and going, letting everything just go and settle down. And just for a few seconds, breathe the way you can. You don't have to overdo it or anything. Just breathe and try to really focus on breathing in, breathing out in any way you can do it. To let everything else just go away for a little while, even if it's only a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Then open your eyes and go, okay, what's next? But already to refocus. And if for some reason breathing is not your thing, you could focus your mind on your feet, for instance. It's a great one. It's a funny one. And it works when you have a very, very busy mind to think about your feet and just go, okay, how my feet are feeling, toes, okay, nice. Soles of my feet, how do I touch the floor? Making it like a game. And that really helps sort of going down one notch. Then you can assess what you're doing and feel clearer about it. But it's really about taking micro breaks. Stop everything, close eyes, refocus, breathe. Then maybe go for, a cup of tea, glass of water, just, look out the window, whatever you can do. And then you can go back to what you were doing and go for it with a clearer mind.
Yeah, really, really good advice. And I guess looking at your notes, the importance of taking breaks. So the breaks you've just mentioned, but building it up so you're actually going out for a 10-minute walk or getting out into nature, that can all help, can't it? Okay,
Absolutely.
Florence, thank you so much. I'm sure people will be very, very interested to know more. So we will, as I said earlier, post all of the links to the guides and everything else in the show notes. And I'm sure we'll get you back on again in the future to talk to us. Yeah, that would be amazing. But thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome, Jill. It was a great pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for listening to this week's show. Check out all the links to the resources mentioned in today's episode and all my freebies in the show notes. See you next time.